You are listening to the Next Play podcast, the playbook for high-performing leaders who want to exceed their full potential. From walking on the Ole Miss football team at 5'7", 150 pounds and earning a full D1 scholarship, to coaching thousands around the world and working with massive organizations like IBM. I've learned countless lessons that I'll be sharing right here with you. Join me as I interview some of the most successful people so you too can learn how to focus on always moving forward by deciding, planning, and executing on the next play relentlessly. This is Richie Contartesi with the Next Play podcast, and today I am super excited to bring you someone who's extremely high level, who's built two extremely powerful SaaS companies. The second one he's recently just sold for $370 million, and he started from the ground up during a recession in 2009. Ziv actually lives in Israel, but I had the pleasure to meet him in person and speak at his sales kickoff a few months back. So someone who I have a lot of respect for, somebody who is always looking for new challenges, as it states on his LinkedIn profile, looking for the next interesting challenge. But Ziv, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Richie.
Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of dive into your journey and discuss how you did this. How did you build a $400 million company and exit? There's so many people out there that would love to be able to do what you did. So let's just start from the early on. How did you get into finding, Kashya, which was your first company, and then move into Zerto? Just quick overview of how you got into the business to begin with.
So basically, just to be accurate, Kashya was my second company. It was my first interesting company. We built a small consulting company because we wanted, the days were like, it was like the surge of the 98, 99, everyone was funding companies and doing stuff. We were a few friends. We came out of the army after several years there doing software. And we wanted to start something of our own. We didn't know what, so we founded something small, which the only thing that stayed from it was the name Kashya, to fund the bills, pay the rent, and stuff. Nothing serious, but some consulting. But then Kashya, right? So that just bought us time, right? And there are different ways to buy at that time. And in Kashya, we came up with an idea, and we built and started pitching it to some VCs, and we actually got and from different groups the same reaction, that they liked us, they did not like the idea, and we had a few proposals to actually go and spend some organized time to really create an idea. They funded it during that, and of course participated after we had something in the business plan and everything. So I think that one of the things there that we've learned is that it's not good to start too quickly, right? It's better to do some more thinking, some more validation, right? Because once you start something, it's several years of your life. And then of course we built we came up with an idea of doing replication. We thought that it was not done well. People were not happy with the way it was done, and we started Kashya. We sold it about 6 years later to EMC for about 150 million. So it was definitely very successful, fast story. It didn't grow to that many customers at the time, right? It wasn't a huge company. We're about 70 people in the company. But it was, it was definitely the first journey really of starting into that. And it starts from going and finding a problem, right? Like people always try to think about a solution. A solution is pretty meaningless without a problem that it solves, and hopefully a pain and someone that understands it. And then we solved it. I took a few years off, so it was a good time. I traveled for some time, studied, started a PhD, which I've never finished, and then we came into the idea of Zerto, right? And we knew about protecting stuff, about disaster recovery, but we've seen that the world is moving to new technologies. It started with VMware, then later Amazon, Azure, and And we said, okay, those things need a rethinking of the way that people used to do to protect those workloads. And really, we thought that this could bring something which can be bigger for them. And we actually started again. We had something. We could have started running. We actually had some VCs that wanted to invest at that time. We actually got a very interesting proposal from another VC to actually go and again take a few months and go and validate that. And we went. We just spoke to customers, right? And that's the one thing I would recommend to anyone who wants to do it: validate with customers.
Yeah.
We always think about what the customers want, but so we just went and we asked customers, and it's super easy to get meetings with customers because every week, if you're an IT buyer, for example, which is what we went for, you get 100 people that go for you and they want your budget. And one person that once in a while will come and actually wants to know what you're thinking, that is going to be that's much stronger. And we got so many yeses. And
dude, that's such a good point right there. Okay, hold on. I just want to pause here because this is such a good, important thing right now. Is before when you were doing this, number one, did you already have an MVP or a minimum viable product in place, or were you just straight up surveying, calling buyers?
No, just PowerPoint of what the product will be. We had enough credibility for people to believe us. We will be able to develop it. So that's when you go without anything to sell to them. You say, if you tell me yes, I can tell you maybe beta in a year, right? But this is the easiest way, because just think about it. If you're a person and everyone comes to you with a lot of interesting products that they try to sell to you, and someone actually wants your opinion, so that's why I said people will do these things. I always like when someone reaches out to me on something like that, much easier than on a sales call.
Right.
And then you go and show them the deck, and you see some of the parts we thought that are really critical and required a lot of technologies, and they're like, well, that sounds a little bit like a science project. It's not critical for us. And then some of the basic parts, they were jumping up and down, and we said, okay, that's the MVP right there. And then you start coding. And then we actually, with that, we raised money, right? And
how many? Do you mind if I? How many people would you go and survey and speak with before you said? Because I'm sure they all had kind of different opinions, and some things you should keep, some you shouldn't. How many people did you talk to before you said, okay, we can build this thing out now?
Well, until you feel comfortable enough. I think there isn't like a rule of something. There are different things, right? For example, virtualization, it was a trend that was taking up at the time. It was still, many people were only using it for side projects, making us irrelevant for that. So some get disqualified there, but you want to see that you've got a big enough market, and B, that market is going to grow to everyone, but not everyone has to be the early adopter. I think it's a subjective thing, right? Like at the end of the day, I come from a science background, right? And with the way of thinking that you always not try to prove that you're right, but it's the other, right? That you always try and prove that your thesis is wrong. And if you throw enough rocks on it and it's still there, then you may have something. But so the more rocks, the better. Obviously, I wouldn't go into analysis crisis if someone wants to do a 5-year. At the end of the day, it's a question. Like, as long as you feel like you come from the meetings and you have something new and it changes what you do, and that's exactly the phase that I'm starting these days, even post HP. It's as long as you feel like it's still moving, then you better validate it. There is a rule of that you want to measure 10 times and cut once. That's the fastest way to get there.
Nice. Okay, cool. No, I really like this. Okay, so before you built your MVP, you surveyed and reached out, and like you said, it's much easier to get those appointments versus a sales call anyways. And I assume did a percentage of those people end up becoming clients once it was built out, or did you work a deal with them like, hey, once we've built this out, we'll if you want to we'll let you test it for free or something like that? Did you work something out to?
No, not. We had a few, right, that became customers later. Not many, actually. Surprisingly, not many, right? Because they have what they did do, which is relevant, is that they would be speaking with the VCs when the VCs invested. And I understand priorities change, right? The fact that something is relevant for someone today doesn't mean it could still be relevant, but does it make the top 3 initiatives to actually go and get into next year's attention? Maybe not. Those things shift. But the word critical, when you raise funding and you have potential customers' testimonials saying, if that's there, I want to be in the beta and I want to buy that. That makes it much easier to fund, because that's what VCs are looking for, right? That's what you're looking for as a. Again, I always think that the founders are also VCs in the fact that we invest like critical years of our life, and we can't we can't hedge that across 10 different investments. So it's one investment, right? You go for 5 to 10 years. You've got maybe 4 runs in the life. It's a big investment. Right. So the more, if you get that validation and you see, okay, it's not like we've talked to 100 customers, 3 said that they might care, 1 actually liked it, and then we go and get that. That's almost lying, right, to yourself, to the VCs, to whoever. Right. But if you go and you see that you have the right, that it's the right thing, that now you say, okay, now there is a pain, there are people feeling that pain, and if I'll talk to enough people, right, I'll probably get that same distribution. That's good enough for me to start a company, right? It doesn't have to be the same people, but if you talk to random people, next year you'll talk to the random people, and maybe someone else will need that, maybe not, but you want to know that it's relevant, right? If you speak to 20 people and they all say, look, yeah, it sounds nice, but not high on my agenda. And again, you have to be asked, because people usually will try to be nice, right? Right. Like you're asking them, it's not like you're asking them for the purchase order where at the end of the day, there is a yes or no here. They'll try and say, but if you don't get happy ears and you go and try and really say, okay, like, does this make your purchase? If it's there, do you want to become a design partner later? Do you want us to be involved? Again, if you challenge this, and you get enough yeses, then you probably have something that's interesting. Now you have to build it, market it, and all of the other stuff, but you have the right foundation. Right.
So let's dive into that. So, okay, so you got the MVP. Hey, we're going to move forward with it. Do you do the coding, or were you mainly stayed in the visionary? Because I mean, you're the visionary, right? Did you also, get into the weeds and actually code too and build the product, or did you mainly stay on the sales and marketing?
No, I did not. I co-founded the company with my brother, with the CTO, and he's the technical person. He started with the coding and running the coding, then building advanced technologies. But I think that a lot of times, right, I've seen that founders that come from the technical side tend to go too much into becoming like these VP engineers. And the companies don't need 2 VP engineers. Probably even the VP engineer doesn't need another one around. And the company needs a lot of other things, right? So it was mainly, if I knew that I had Oded, my brother, who I knew that the technical side and the product side would be completely there. Then also I come from a coding background. I like to code. I sometimes even code for fun at home, but not at work. I was responsible much more of all the other stuff. If it's the financial side, funding, CFO, and all of that stuff, or the go-to-market side, or the support side, and really building that as a company. Because I knew that if I would be diving there, then the company wouldn't have a CEO that takes care of all of the stuff that has to be running.
Okay, so let's say, okay, so your brother starts getting to work right away. What did you do? What did you do to build the company? Did you focus on go to market? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was between funding, because remember, like every 18 months, the company has to go and get funding, which is 3 months that I'm completely detached. So funding, go to market, I spend a lot of time. I love speaking with customers. That's always. By the way, it's also recommended. If you have a bad day and everything is not working, obviously you speak to a customer, then suddenly it gets your head straight.
Right.
But
I like that.
And then of course building the team, right? Over time we expanded, building the executive team, building the operational rhythm of the company, of how we work as an executive team. I think that as a CEO, you have to know that each one of the people working for you is a bigger expert at what they do than you are.
Right.
It's not a normal way of hierarchy, but my CFO knows more about finance than I do. My VP engineering is a better VP engineering than I was. But then you have to be like the one orchestrating it, and in some cases even changing some of the people, of the responsibilities. So that's a lot of work of building building the team. So I would say building the team, funding the company, which, like I said, every 18 months I had to disconnect for 3 months and make sure that the team is independent enough to not really need me, and you know, and all the other stuff, which is also a considerable amount of time. Like every time there is something else that counts.
Fire something. So
Yeah,
how did you?
please.
Okay, so let's talk about funding, and then I want to talk about the team. So what was your process for going out and getting funding? Like, how did you go about saying, okay, we got the MVP, we got the surveys, we're already starting to code it. How did you go about funding it?
So that was easy, right? Once you have a pain and you've spoken to enough customers and to people around that, right, including like the resellers, potential partners, you talk, like, once you have enough of these validation points and you can describe what this does for your customers, and you can show customer testimonials that show that it's there, and maybe some of the VCs will connect you to some customers that you want, which is great. That's another piece of advice to get for free, and they get that. It's pretty easy, right? Then it just becomes a question of how much and what valuation, which in my opinion are the less important things, right? It's again, more is usually better, but once you can get funding, and if the company will do well, you'll be able to get the next funding, right? So the most important thing is to get it off the ground, right? That's actually really relevant for the next play. It's just like you want to get it, like as long as it's not too short, right? The one thing that was important is that we'll be able to show some progress before the next round.
So you're trying to get at least 1.5 to 2 years worth of funding.
Yeah, usually. My also recommendation to people is to also remember that funding, it's based on some story, and there are basically, I would say, 2 types of stories. One is a story that's based on vision and slides and the PowerPoint, which is pretty much any first round, right? Obviously, there's nothing more. You can have few testimonials from the customers, but they're still like none of them are backed by a check that the customer wrote. So talk is cheap. Right, but it's like I told you, many of them did not write checks eventually. So, so that's one time, right? And yeah, and then there is some point where you actually go and raise based on numbers, based on revenue, growth, etc. The point is that sometimes companies put themselves too early in the place before them. For example, if you've just launched the product and you have the first 3 paying customers, and you had 10 customers in the beta, let's say half of them converted. That's great. That's above, no one gets to 50% there, right? But 5 of them converted. Now you go to raise a round. You've got $100,000 of revenue, right? So the numbers aren't impressive, but they're there. So people are already talking numbers. So now boom, that 100K is there. You've got the 10 from the betas, that 5 of them converted, and you're proud. What's the first question people ask? Why did the other 5 did not convert?
Right.
That's the first. I think that sometimes people are much better off when they go and do it a few months earlier. They don't have customers yet. They're just before. That's what we did in the series.
Oh, it's better before you have all the numbers.
That's before, because then you're still on story.
Right.
A year later, you'll have to be in numbers, and if the numbers aren't good, then the funding is not going to be good.
It's no longer about the story.
But there you're like, almost by nature, the numbers aren't good. The numbers cannot be good in the first few months, right? You didn't have, you converted some of the betas. Now you just started selling. But now if you go too early versus before that, now you've got 10 beta customers. They're saying great things about your product. They're saying that if you got to 5, then all of them are saying that they are planning to buy it next quarter, right? If you get that, then you're still not, then you're at 5 out of 10. Right, and that's a much better story. And then you say, okay, that's the last time I'm raising on a story, and then you raise enough money that in the next round you'll already have enough proof points that you'll be able to speak with numbers.
Right. Because now this money that you're raising, what is this for? What's your approach? Do you go, hey, I'm going to take this money, I'm going to stay in the CEO role, but I'm also going to run go-to-market. I'm also going to run, and you try to do as much as you can on your salary and use the money? Or do you say the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking this money and I'm building an executive team?
No, first thing is absolutely taking an executive team, because My assumption always was that I need to delegate everything, right? I know it didn't sound like a lot of funding the company, building and running the executive team, and handling the fires, the other stuff. It is a lot, right? So anything that's on me is probably not going to get handled well. I can be in one meeting or something, that's great, but anything that requires constant work. So no, I had my CMO was with us. We came just like with the Series A, 18 months before we had a product to sell, because we need to build. Marketing is not something to say, okay, just go and start, right? It takes
So you
as much
hired
to
a
build as a
CMO?
product.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as soon as we had like the first converted betas, we hired a CRO. They weren't called CMO at the time; they were called VP Marketing, VP Sales. The terminology changed over the years, but it's the same. It's
Now
the same
it's a
responsibility.
Chief Revenue
Global
Officer.
end-to-end marketing, global end-to-end sales. It's the same. It's the same. Today it would be called CRO. Just at the time more or less C's there. But in any case, it's yeah, it's always if you want something to run, as long as once you want it to run, if you want to go and try something, if you want to go and pitch to the first 3 customers, like as long as it's tiptoeing, that can be done by me or someone else. But once you have, it's a full-time job at least, right? Like every CRO I had, every chief revenue was always working 20 hours a day, right? So it's not something I can do. And 20 hours a day with 20 years of experience doing exactly that, right? So assuming that I can just go and step in and wing it sounds a little bit presumptuous even for me.
And I would assume that's something that a deal you would have worked out with your VC anyway, right? Like, hey, we're gonna put these people in place.
You always build a plan, right? Once you have,
obviously,
you build a plan, and in that plan, you want to budget for that and raise enough money to
pay the salary.
have the plan aligned with what you're going to do.
Right. Now, so the three executives you hired was, in today's terms, a CMO, a CRO, and a chief operating officer, or was that you?
No, we didn't have a chief operating officer for a long time in Zerto. So we had my brothers, so co-founder and CTO, with a CMO, with a CRO, a CFO came later, HR came a little bit later. I think these were the first 4 that we had.
Yeah. So it's interesting because a lot of people will build their company the opposite way. So they'll hire employees and be the leader, and then hire management as they grow. And your concept was, no, I'm going to put the top people in place. And then, did they do the work in the beginning? Like, did your CMO actually do the marketing work? Or did they hire
I think
people?
so. You start tiny, right? You have to start small, right? They have to be people that can work with. At the end of the day, marketing is it's really a lot of it is a budget, right? It comes from budget, and you decide how much marketing budget there is, and then spending that much budget requires people, right? That requires work from people, right? And spending it wisely, obviously, right? Not spending it, but spending it wisely, and then there is some conversion rates, and as long as the budget is small enough that it's in one person, then yes, and he builds the overall strategy and build it, and when it starts growing, then he recruited additional people to the team.
Got it. But in the beginning, he was actually doing a lot of the implementation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't that hard to hire someone though? Like hire someone who could be a leader, but also has the skill set to actually be able to implement and do in the beginning.
So again, it has to be. For example, if we're talking about marketing, that person I think also grew in Zerto, right? The same way that I grew in Zerto, right? It's not like today. It's the same, but you have to find people that are on the way up, because they'll have, again, like you're saying, if the initial challenge is if they've already done things 100 times bigger than that, then that's going to be boring for them. And if not, then if they can't grow, then they won't be able to do the stuff when it's 100 times bigger, which could be. I think that it's possible to find. You have to find the people who want to be in the company, right? Because remember, there's also a special opportunity. Anyone coming to run a marketing organization, if there's already an organization, there's legacy, there are things that are done, there are things that will take 10 years to change, that they'll always have to live with the decisions of the previous person.
Yeah.
There is an added value to building something from scratch, right? That they can go and implement their strategies, their philosophy. Obviously, one of the things someone like that will check is that the company is on the right trajectory, that they want to be standing on alone doing campaigns for the next 5 years. But as long as these are the plans, I think we can hire, and we hired well.
Nice. Very good. Okay, cool. So, all right. So you built your executive team, and then what were your steps from there? What was your role? Were you just managing this executive team on a weekly basis and just making sure that all the numbers are accurate and conversion rates are good and the sales conversion rates are good and the software's coming along as quickly as it should on track? Like, what was kind of your role?
So there is some of that. I'm actually not, by my personal nature, not that's operational role, and that's not my strongest suit, right? So actually, when we over time, that's something that we actually gave an executive to be in that position. But there's also every time, like for every I don't think it's management, because I wasn't managing them. They were like high executives. They don't need me to go into their decisions. I don't need their decisions approved by me or anything. And like I said, professionals are much better than me. And frankly, I don't have the time it takes. I think it's more about leadership, right? That's once it comes. So you have to understand where you're taking the company from A to B, and what steps it will do in that process, and then what does the company need to focus on this year, and what are the things the company needs to change this year. And sometimes I was right about it, sometimes not, but going and running that for the company all the time and focusing on that thing, which changes from year to year, right? So like I said, it could be the numbers, the sales numbers. I always had the CRO. The CRO always looks at the sales numbers, and the CFO looks over his shoulder
Right.
on the
For
same
sure.
numbers, and with so yeah, but there are times where that was top of mind every day, and there were times where something else was there. So it just varies, right? And I think that's really what the company needs. It's a little bit of that glue that comes and goes, leads that. But remember, it's not just figuring out. It's not a thinking task. It's actually even then taking that company, which at the biggest time were about 800 people, and aligning the company to go and accomplish those changes that we need to get from A to B with C and D in the middle in the next couple of years. So I think that's really where that was. I think that's where I contributed the most on that, really helping us where we want to go.
You're mainly the visionary. Here's the direction that we're going to go, and making those bigger decisions.
The direction and pushing and leading the companies through that. But yes, it's for every operational thing, I had someone that did it. I wasn't other than building the team and keeping the funding, and even that at some point went to the CFO. My role was really that forward-looking thing.
Now, do you feel like if you build in the next company, do you feel like you'll do the same thing? You'll go the same route of getting funding, building the executive team first, or do you feel like there's some things that you've learned from that you might do differently?
There are different things, right? I'm starting something, right? I don't know what. We're still in the concept of finding the paint that we like, with other ex-Zerto people who are already also left HP at the same time. So it's so we're thinking, and it's really about exactly that route of starting with thinking ourselves, building up something, and then going and talking to potential customers, potential industry, all of the things that you do to validate the heck out of the idea.
Right.
I assume that in a few months we'll have something pretty validated. Now, Are we going to take some VC money for those 6 months? Probably not. We're in a different financial position today. We don't need salaries for these for these 6 months.
I assume so.
Right, but it could be like if we need to, that's an option. We could that just moves. I've always focused on where the company should go. I think sometimes people spend way too much time about funding rounds. How many percentage could I get this? What valuation? Again, they might be right, but and sometimes people say, well, maybe I don't want. I can raise more money, but then I'll get diluted. I'm saying I know that there are some people who are saying we're happy where we're going. Then there are some people who say, well, if I would have raised more money, then that would have avoided my company from some time where we really needed money. And then I'm sure that there are some people say I've raised more money and I was diluted by an extra 2% in exit day. I've never met that type of people. I think people at the end of the day, percentages don't matter. It's percentages out of what? If you want to build something big, then make sure that something big is going to be good, and then everyone is going to be okay.
Right. With everything.
And
What's like if you can answer this, what's like that first round after you have the idea, you go through this process, in 6 months, let's say, that first round, what does that look like for that first 18 months? Like how much would you suggest someone try to raise? They're going to build their executive team.
It depends on what they need to go and get to the next milestone.
Let's say you have a visionary, you've got a CTO, someone who's very technical, and you want to build out your executive team. You're going to need some funding for marketing and stuff like that. What's like I know it could vary a lot, but what would you say is an idea?
I don't know. Look, my data is the last time I've done it was in 2009. We raised $6 million there, which was enough for us to build about a 15, 20 people team with the base core executive team, develop an MVP of the product and have it in betas and be ready just before we actually go and GA the product, and now we start to sell with a few months to spare, because you don't want to run to the last dollar. That's bad, right? So they always say you have to leave at least 6 months of runway. So that was $6 million, but that was 2009 salaries. Those took a big spike since. Maybe they'll take some turn. So what I'm saying is, in a few months, when I'll be in that position where I'll know what we'll do and we'll build the plan, then I'll probably have a number. I think if it was 6 then for something like that, it could be 9 or 10 today. But it all depends on what someone wants to do. What do you need to do to get to that level where now you can go and you've reached that milestone and you can get the next funding based on that milestone.
Right.
If it's I've developed half the product, you won't get anything more than before you developed it, right? So that just means that you've raised too little money the first time. You have to get to a milestone, to a tangible milestone, which is also right. It's like everything, right? Is that there's a reason they call it venture capital, like with everything, and that could be as true for my next venture. Having 2 successes doesn't guarantee them for that. Maybe you don't get to that milestone, and that's also good, right? But at least then you know that you're tracking against that milestone. That's where you need to get.
Nice. All right. So okay. So walk me through just, how did you take this from building the executive team to 800 people? As a visionary, how did you do that? Like, what was kind of I know it's a long, there's 10 years, I think, in there, or 8 years in there. But.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's every day is don't stop, because every day it's one customer at a time, right? And you grow from few customers to more going, and I think a lot of it was managing the change, because we were growing very quickly, both in customers and in headcount. So the company was changing, right? My role was different every year than it was in the previous year. It's very different to be the leader of a 200 people company than the leader of a 400 people company than the leader of an 800 people company. It really changes, right? You have to learn different things, use different toolkit. Not actual tools, but
I mean,
but really, you have to use different techniques or different things that are needed. And I I think that you always just have to think what is the, like I said, what does the company need this year? What are the things that if we get in the next 12 months will make us better, more ready for that long-term trajectory, right? Do we need to go and rebuild our support for scale? Because today everything is built on the knowledge of 3 people, and if one of these 3 people goes on vacation, then or we start getting too many customers, that's not good enough. So every time, 1 year it could be that, 1 year it could be that sales and marketing are stuck, 1 year it could be that we have some culture issues, right? Every time you have to think what are the, and it's not one, there isn't one initiative. It's usually like what are top 3 is usually manageable. What are the 3 things that you can accomplish in the next 12 months? And if every year 2 out of these 3 I picked right, then it could be, then it's engaging the company, making it actually happen.
Nice. And so so your process is kind of like, okay, I'm looking at the company as a whole. What are the top, 2 or 3 biggest challenges? And then you would kind of look at, prioritize those challenges and then find solutions that would help the company to continue to move forward. That was kind of your process.
Yeah. I got a good advice once. It says that you have to start your day by figuring out what are the 3 most important things you need to get done this year, then the 3 most important things you need this quarter, this month, this week, and today. Yeah. And if you go and, again, I don't think that anyone actually goes and maintains those lists on a daily basis. It's probably a good thing to do, but
yeah, I'd say
I'm an honest person. I'm not going to say that I did it, but as long as you've got that picture in your head every day, what are the 3 things I need to get this year, and as CEO, sometimes maybe even in the next 5 years, but then this year to get there, and this quarter, this month, and you find out that it helps you focus your days and weeks on the stuff that actually goes and moves the years forward. Because as CEO, right, we always think, okay, like that quarter is going slow. What can we do the last months of the quarter? Answer is nothing. Right. Don't have calls with 2 customers. Maybe they like the fact that they spoke with the CEO. Maybe something else they will impress them. I can't move the needle significantly. I think that usually as CEOs we have very little effect about what happens this quarter, a little bit of effect of what happens this year, and a huge effect on what happens 3 years from now, right? So,
right.
And that's why, right, I think it's always important to remember that that's our responsibility, right? Because other people take care of this quarter, this week, and today, and we as CEOs have to think every day about what are the things that we need to do today, but in the focus on keeping that speed. Yes, right. You always get that call that then suddenly you go into something in legal, in finance, and there are like all these fires, right? So fires you deal on a daily basis, but you need to know what are the 3 things today that actually build the strategy and the vision that you need to go and find time to them, even if you are fired. Right,
while you're doing that. Okay, so let's walk through your process of moving on. So what, you're running this company, you got 800 people, it's a hell of a company. How did you decide, like, hey, I want to exit? Like, that's a big talked about thing, especially in the SaaS space, is building your company and designing an exit. Is that something that you anticipated and wanted to happen and kind of set up that way, or was it more something that happened organically?
So I think it's really right. My departure now from the business, that's the easier thing, right? Because we got acquired about last July, so about 18 months ago, by HPE, right? Where the goal was always to go and find that time to integrate it, right? Really, which by itself makes my position not relevant, right? Or it's integrated in the right places. Yeah. How long would that have taken? That was a different question. I think that it's once it was ready, I think it's a much healthier and will work better there, right? So that was the easy, right? And I was already 13 years there, which makes, so it was a very that the timing was really set by being able to get there. Now, the real question you can ask is when we sold Zerto to HP, I think it was the right thing at the time. We had a lot of things that were going well for us. We were 800 people at the peak. We weren't 800 people when we got bought, right? We had to go and make some changes to go to profitability. And some things weren't, it took us time to get them working. And I think it made more sense to go and team up with a bigger company, right? So at the time, it was definitely the right thing.
Yeah.
A few years earlier, right, we had plans to go and build a company that would go higher that as an independent company, but not everything worked. Right, we had so I think overall it turned out to be a very, very good win-win for everyone.
Yeah. Do you think on your next company you're going to look at building more of an independent that gets to that, you know, whatever they call it, the unicorn and beyond, or do you feel like you would kind of stick with the same strategy of building a company to a point and then merging?
No, the strategy was to build it as independent. We just didn't get far enough on the independent. I hope that I've learned some stuff in the last and the company was independent for 12 years, right?
Right, it's a long time.
Very significant revenue. Yeah, I think so. That's definitely. I don't really care about unicorns, right? I think that valuations, like I mentioned before, I think that that's just you know, each one flapping who's bigger, but it's really for me more of what I really want to get in my next company is to build it to be that $500 million in revenue plus company. I assume that means a lot of other things on valuations and things, but really that's the goal of really building something that takes a bigger chunk of the market, takes more stuff, because that's really my goal for the next company. If we get there or not, then at some point acquisition could be the right thing, but really the goal is to build it independently.
Yeah. Do you feel like now with your experience with Kashya and now Zerto that the next one that you build, you'll be able to do it in a much shorter period of time?
I don't know. Zerto was much faster than Kashya, that's for sure. But I hope. I don't know, right? I hope that experience. I'm a big believer in experience, right? But I'm starting to be older now, right? So I know there are a lot of young kids there with crazy dreams and ideas, and maybe I'm the dinosaur, right? And maybe it's going to be slower. I don't know. I think I still have a very. I think it's going to be a fun round, but I don't think I don't know the future. I love what I'm doing, right? So I hope it's faster. I hope to get to those bigger numbers and company. I love that part of the company, so I hope to get there faster. But at the end of the day, it's the market and the customers and some of our own performance that will really affect where we'll get. So,
okay,
I can't predict yet.
All right, so I want to talk about you today. So, you know, you said briefly that you're doing consulting work now while you're building this.
No. That I was doing back before Kashya. I was doing consulting.
Oh, okay. So right now you're fully focused on this next idea.
I'm also resting after certain years of very intense work. We're all taking it a little bit easy in the first because we just left HPE 2 weeks ago. I personally am also getting used to a new status. I got divorced a couple of months ago. So again, learning how to take care of the girls, maybe get them something to eat that doesn't come on a scooter. But so I'm getting some of that time, but also that initial level of thinking, like I told you, we're in a very early, right? We don't know, we haven't even decided on the payment solution. So we're going very wide, and that's not done intensively. You can't go and sit. You have to let things boil in your mind and in my partner's minds. So we're getting there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so one thing I feel like I've noticed is that when you have an idea and you begin kind of implementing and diving into it, it starts evolving and going in a certain direction that there's no way you could have rushed that. You know what I mean? It has to, like, the only way to get there is time. Is that something that you fully agree
I
with?
agree. It's not a lot of time, but you need to get
Because
let
things
it
build on
run.
each other. Ideas build on different things.
Exactly right, and it takes some time for us to digest and do that stuff. Yeah, there are things that you go in the first phases. Like there isn't a way to work full time on that. It just isn't, right? So that's why sometimes people are doing it when they're doing something else. There isn't just enough to fill the day. Like the mind needs some time to evolve, or at least my mind.
Yeah,
It's
for sure. No, I think most, for sure. Maybe
I
there's
agree. I think it's
some
a
people.
but it's a fun time. That's the most creative time in the company. That's the time that there is absolutely zero operational stuff. It's all about that creativity, right? So you can go wild with the ideas and in a much more than you'll be able to do the day after the first dollar being invested and employee being hired. After that, it's always
Right.
tainted with that's the only time of pure creativity, so it's fun.
And now, are you gonna build a international team, or are you gonna stay in Israel? What's kind of your thought on this one?
Well, I'm personally staying in Israel, as I mentioned, being divorced with girls right there. I am not moving anywhere. The
I
team will
appreciate
be.
your openness too. Like, so many people would never be transparent about that. Like, when I first met you, I was like, man, this guy's like transparent and real. And
Not easy. Anything that requires me right to move, it has to understand that it's a question of what's more important to me, what that thing is, or my daughters, and I think that's a pretty high bar. Well, I haven't figured out anything that could pass it, right? So I think that's a pretty safe assumption that I'm here. I'm here like I was here in Zerto, right? Where I was flying all the time. There were 6 months that I spent 2 weeks in Boston, 1 week in Israel, right? It's all based on what's needed, but home is going to be here. The team is definitely going to be international. I think there are two reasons, right? One is that it's close to the market. US is usually the main market, so we'll have to go to market functions. That's the right place for them to be in the US. But I think it's also a good mixture of the team. I think there are good things in both US and Israeli culture that can work together, and it's done. If it's done like in a respectful way, right, that everyone sees that, then there are. I think it creates a mixture which is better than each one of the parts. At least that's been my experience in Zerto.
got it. So as far as, in kind of wrapping up here, what is your, I know that you're building this new venture and challenge, and some of your colleagues or old, that have moved on as well. What's your next play? What's your initial focus for the next, let's say, 1 to 3 months as you get this going?
Oh, figure out building. If in 3 months I have a deck, a product deck, no code behind that, but a product deck that I feel strongly that it solves a big problem and that I get the right responses, that if we find a solution, then customers will want, then it's easy. Finding the solutions are the easy part, right? Finding the right problem, right? That someone cares and will actually prioritize, right?
Right. And pay for?
Reporting is not enough. It has to be one of the top three for someone else. If we feel like if we're there, and I'm pretty sure we'll be there. That's my next play. Next play is being able to say, okay, this is the problem we're going to solve. Once we get there, then it's easy stuff. Then it's funding and building the solution and stuff. They take a lot of work, but we'll definitely get there, right? That part is the fully open one. Once we're directed, then we go
I
to the
love
next
it.
one after that. But next play is to really figuring out the pain, the pride, pinpointed pain and the problem that we want to solve.
And now, in order to do that, just so, because I know there's people that are going to be doing this, I think it's really good. You're going to be, not only building the deck, but you're also going to be setting meetings with potential buyers and
Of
walking
course.
them through it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first one we're trying these things on is my good friends Google, right? So you go and search the internet and go and see, okay, what other people think about it, right? And you build your own, I call it like thesis, right? That has a value, then you have to go and validate it with, like I said, with partners, with customers, with people in the industry. You need to go and throw as many rocks on it to feel like it's solid, right? Because, but it's, and at every time, the more it crystallizes, right, then we can go and take it to more people and get more feedback on it. So it's an iterative process on that, but it includes validation, right? I'm not talking 3 months just sitting in the room and thinking, right? That's,
right. No. Yeah. So okay. The last question I have in here, I think, is on funding, and I know people are going to be thinking this. For somebody who's already had the success that you had, once you've got this pain point and it's dialed in and you got a deck, I mean, are you even like, for what would you say your process is for getting funding versus what somebody who's maybe has their first business or second business is getting funding?
At the end of the day, I think it's the same, right? You have to go. You look, VCs. I've spoken to one VC, for example, that he told me that for him, for example, he's very easy to reach. He said that if someone cannot reach him, that's a problem by itself. So I think that the first thing is that you have to figure out what you want to say, right? So you build a business plan, right, which is a high thing, but at the end of the day, you have to understand which questions you're trying to answer and what are your answers to these questions. And once you start building it with yourself and validating it, once you have that, then it's pretty easy. Then you package that into a story. People hear stories, they don't hear slides or facts, right? And then you think, okay, what are the messages I want to get across? And you build that story, and you build a deck to that story, and you start setting meetings with VCs. VCs are waiting, right? When someone asks me, can you introduce me to VC X? I'm always saying yes, right? Because when I'm introducing, I'm not validating it for the VC. I'm not saying I'm recommending that idea. I'm just saying, you're looking for deal flow. That's your business. Here's a deal that may or may not, right? Whether they say yes or no, that depends only on the deck. But it's very easy to get to these people because they're searching for those. They're looking. That's their business, right? They're not snobs. They may say no, but they want to hear that first, right? And if it's interesting enough, then, by the way, you always get a lot of no's, right? Like it's not.
How many no's did you get for Zerto before you got a yes?
It wasn't before we got a yes, because we decided to actually go because we felt like we had it tracked pretty tight and we preferred to do it on a timeline. So we kept everyone waiting until we had something ready, and then we reached out to like 10 VCs at once because we wanted all the process to go at the same time. So because they take a few weeks or a couple of months until to do their work, so we didn't want to be very late with someone else and then just have the intro meeting. So we had everyone together, and some of them said no, some of them said yes, and not even all the ones who said yes, right? We only were looking at the time. Like I said, we took some money from one VC, which guaranteed. We were looking for 2 VCs on that Series A, but one of them was guaranteed already from that early investment. So really, we had one spot left, and we had a few that wanted, but we also had several that didn't want to invest. They may not like the field, they may not like the product, they may not believe with that, it may not be high on their investment thesis. I mean, who cares, right? There are 100 VCs, at most you'll raise from 2 in the first round, maybe 3. So you can get 90 no's and still have pretty good selection at the end. Like, you have to make sure it's wide enough that you get more than one yes. One yes, that's not good usually. Right, and VCs also, they don't act good. They don't act well when they're the only yes. They act better when they feel like there's competition around. So you need to have enough. And then if you've spoken to 100 and no one said yes, there's a problem either with the idea or the story or the deck. But I wouldn't say speak to the 101. Right, that's At the end of the day, you get a pretty good read of what's there, but you need a story and pitch that story. That's
I like
that's the easy part.
All right, so how can someone find you if someone wanted to reach out and connect? I know you're on LinkedIn. If someone has
I'm on LinkedIn. If someone wants, they need to send me something on LinkedIn. That's
you might have some investors
in the call it the 1 to 2 seconds I gave to a messenger to see. 90% of them are people offering me solutions, outsourcing. if someone wants my opinion, make sure that it's easy for me to spot in that initial look. If it is, I can guarantee that I'll
That's
answer.
cool. That's awesome, man. For
I always
someone of
do.
your caliber to do that. That's really good. And I agree with you on that. Like LinkedIn messages is like a nightmare to try and go through. So if you accept
but I'll tell you, if you can't figure out a way to send a message that I'll see it, then on LinkedIn, because I do check them, not every day, but I do check the LinkedIn messages. But most of them is click, click, click. If you can't get by that, then probably you've got bigger problems to solve before starting a company. I'm sure that anyone is going to be creative enough to get me. It's easy.
Cool.
Because I will answer.
Awesome. Ziv, really appreciate that, and that you making the time to do that, and for being here today. Someone of your caliber. So thank you so much. Really appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you, Richie, and glad to speak again. We really enjoyed having you in our sales kickoff a few weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Play podcast. If you liked the show, make sure to leave us a review. For more resources, visit relentlessuniversity.com or download the free Relentless University app. And if you're interested in having me speak at your next event, visit relentlessrichie.com. Until next time.